Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 23 playthrough of the Pittsburgh Pirates. We are well into the 2048 season, 113 games into the 2048 season to be specific. And it's been a rough year for the Pirates. We're 4.5 back in the race for the wild card, 15.5 back in the race for the National League Central title. So the Central is gone at this point. We decided not to be sellers at the trade deadline because we do only have to get past two teams to get to a wild card spot. And if we're able to get to a wild card spot, that would mark our 8th consecutive playoff season. But you can see right now we are certainly not on pace to make it there. And part of the reason that it's been a tough season is that we're not playing as well as we did a year ago. That is a very simplistic explanation, but we are last in the National League in runs scored, and we are 8th in runs allowed. Last year, I believe we were 2nd in both of those categories in a 100-win season when we won the NL Central, had home field advantage throughout the playoffs, and lost in the World Series in 6 games to the Red Sox. So I expected our pitching this year to take a little bit of a step back. We were moving on from longtime ace Luis Longoria, longtime starter Bobby Gonzalez, longtime reliever Ethan Mingo, as well as a closer that we brought on at the trade deadline last year. And although we did have some talent in the minors to fill those gaps, certainly losing 2 starters, a closer, and a good reliever is going to have an impact on your pitching staff. But the decline in our offense has been a bigger surprise for me. We really basically only lost a 4th outfielder, Henry Gonzalez, and a backup infielder, Bobby Guzman, last year as far as our everyday players. But when I've looked through our team, it seems like we had 5 or 6 guys, everyday players, who kind of performed a little better than I would have expected last year. And this year it's kind of the opposite, where we've got the majority of our starters in our everyday lineup are performing a little worse than expectations. Nobody, or not nobody, but very few players have completely fallen off the cliff in terms of their production. But we don't really have anyone who's outperforming this year. And as I talked about, the result is that we're last in the National League in runs scored. The hope is that we can turn things around down the stretch. We're also dealing with a couple of key injuries. Noshitaro Nakahara, who was a big-time player for us last year with 28 homers and 360 at-bats, is kind of the one player who has completely fallen off this year. Can see a batting average of $1.99 with 5 homers and 151 at-bats. And he's also recently started his 3rd stretch on the injured list. And then our ace pitcher, Sean Street, 8-4 with a 3.39 ERA, is out with a bicep strain. We did make a trade close to the trade deadline for Xavier Rabb, pitcher in the final, I think he's in the final year of his contract. Yeah, the final year of his contract, who can fill in as a competent starter for us. Didn't have to give up too much for him. You can see he's slotted in as our number 3 starter. So if we do get Sean Street back, I feel like with Alex Arroyo and Devin Smith, the youngsters, and then the veterans Rabb and Street, we would have a nice 4-man rotation for the playoffs. But the question right now is, are we going to be able to get to the playoffs? The other thing I haven't mentioned that has made the year challenging is that our longtime owner, Robert Nutting, passed away and turned the team over to his son, Robert Nutting Jr., who not only is a penny pincher like his father was, but is demanding in terms of his patience and meddling in terms of his involvement. So it's become a unpleasant situation to be working with the meddling and penny pinching Robert Nutting Jr. on a daily basis. We'll see what happens. Our goal is still to get this team to the playoffs. If and when we get to the playoffs, want to make a long run. Whether or not we'll be successful, that we're going to find out over the next several weeks. Taking a look at the team schedule, got St. Louis for a couple days at home, homestand against San Diego, and then on the road for Colorado this weekend. 5-game set in Milwaukee. So we got plenty of opportunities to play the teams in our division this month. You can see also at Cincinnati, home again against Milwaukee, and then at the Cubs. So we're going to get to play everyone else in the NL Central over the course of this month of August before we get to roster expansion. As I mentioned, we're not going to win the NL Central. So the divisional games aren't quite as important, but clearly over these last 49 games of the season that we've got left, probably going to need to win at least 30 of them to have any chance at the playoffs, and even 30 only gets us to 84 wins, barely over 500. Might even need to do better than that, but certainly I'd say getting to 86, 87 wins, which is 32 or 33 wins, is probably where we're going to need to be to claim one of those wild card spots. And the month of August has gotten off to a good start. We split those final 2 games of the series against St. Louis, but then we swept San Diego and took 2 out of 3 in Colorado. So a 6-2 record to start the month, and that's a little better than what we need to do. I mentioned we had 49 games left, and we probably needed to get to 32 or 33 wins to make it to the playoffs. So we basically got to be winning about 2/3 of our games. That's the goal, and we're above that 2/3 threshold here in the early stages of August. So with the record at 60-61, I'd say the goal for the next week with 5 games at Milwaukee and then 3 games at the Mets is to probably, the goal is definitely to win at least 5 of those games so we have a winning record when we check in a week from now. We'll see whether or not that happens, and certainly with 5 of those games on the road, it's not a given by any stretch of the imagination, especially against a good Milwaukee team, but we're at the point in the season where can't worry about who we're playing. We just have to go out and win games. And unfortunately, the series against the Brewers went almost as bad as it possibly could. We lost 4 out of 5, so the record stands at 61-65 right now. Taking a look at the standings, we're 15 back in the division, and we are now 4 back in terms of the wild card. Shockingly, we're tied as the first team out, which is why we're going to keep hoping we can close the gap, but obviously need to play better to get that gap closed. We also have Alex Ruacho banged up with back spasms. We're going to put him on the IL just to be careful. He's having a down year, as I mentioned, many of our players are. That's going to give us an opportunity to bring up Jaden Godfrey, the youngster who spent the past 2 years in AAA. We've been training him down there to become a pretty versatile defensive player. You can see he can play first, second, third, left, center, and right. Probably a natural right fielder in terms of where he'd be the best, but certainly with a 60 range. Could play him in center if we had to. More of a contact hitter, extra base power with that gap power and speed, but not a lot of home runs, not a lot of walks, hitting just 226 in AAA this year. But it's time to see what the 25-year-old who was a former first-round draft pick of us can do at the major league level. So we're going to bring him up in the absence of Ruacho over the next week and a half, and see if maybe he can spark our lineup a little bit. In bad news on starter Sean Street, uncertain return from that strained bicep, so certainly losing our ace for some more games is not the way we wrote things up. We did take 2 out of 3 against the Mets, but it was still a 3-5 week. We cannot afford too many weeks where we're not above 500. We've got a full week against divisional rivals coming up with 3 at Cincinnati and then 3 at home against Milwaukee. We're getting to the point where we have to start winning just about every series, and unfortunately it's the 2 best teams in the division that we're going to have to do that against this coming week. And we took only 1 out of 3 on the road against division-leading Cincinnati. We have won 2 in a row at home against Milwaukee, so if we can get the series sweep today, that'll still give us 4 out of 6, although we kind of did it the hard way, having to win 4 of our last 5 and to sweep Milwaukee at home. More injury issues. Backup utility infielder Luis Linares, day-to-day with a strained ab for the next couple weeks. Just a minimal impact on everything. But given that he's already wrecked physically and he's not an incredibly important offensive player for us, although that 290 average and 100 at-bats is pretty good for the Pirates this year and obviously still brings a lot defensively. But given the fact that he's wrecked physically, he's 34 years old, I think there's just a good chance that if we don't put him on the IL, this is going to turn into something more significant. And since he's not really in the lineup every day, although he had been playing shortstop more recently, regularly with some of the injuries we've had as we tried to shore up our defense. But I don't think it's a critical loss to put him on the IL. And although we're not giving up on the year yet, it will give us an opportunity to hopefully see some of our younger talent from AAA. And that will allow us to bring up Jerry Drake, who actually is pretty similar to Godfrey. Pretty good contact hitter. Not going to hit a lot of home runs. Not going to walk a lot. And pretty versatile defensively, although not quite as good as Godfrey, in my opinion. But it'll let us get Drake onto the roster as a utility infielder for us. Godfrey thus far hitting 240 and 25 at-bats, so hasn't been great, hasn't been horrible. And unfortunately, we couldn't get the sweep against the Brewers. Lost the final game at home 7-3. Alex Ruacho is able to come off the IL, which is positive. So we had a great week, followed by 2 mediocre weeks. Taking a look at what that adds up to: 12-10 record, 545 winning percentage, which is better than we were in that brutal month of July. But as we talked about earlier, not quite good enough to get us to the point where we're going to be a playoff team. I think we've got to raise that winning percentage by about 100 points to get enough W's before the season is over. Certainly here on August 24th at 66 and 69 with 1 week to go. 4 games at home against Atlanta and then 3 on the road at the Cubs. Goal certainly at a minimum is probably to get to 500 by the end of the month. And with 7 games left in the month, that means we've got to go 5-2. If we can go into September with a 500 record, maybe we can sneak into the playoffs. Still 4 out. Tied with the Cardinals as the first team out in that chase for the wild card. So if we string together a couple real good weeks, we're going to be right in the mix for the playoffs. Issue is we're running out of weeks in which we can string together those potential wins. And we took 2 out of the first 3 against Atlanta here. Obviously, hope to win the 4th game today at home to clinch the series. Some more good news. Obviously, we brought Ruacho back onto the team when we talked about him coming off the IL, and Sean Street, with that unknown time to healing, is now ready to come back. How long has it been? I think it's only been, it's been probably a month. June 21st, so it's been 5 weeks. I almost feel like we should give him a rehab start, but I also feel like we can't really afford to give him a rehab start. But I don't think we can afford to have him push too hard and get injured, or also just get rocked in his first start back if he's a little rusty after being out for 5 weeks. So I think we'll give him 1 start in AAA before we bring him up. The other benefit of that is that that'll get us to September roster expansion, and we won't have to make a decision on sending someone to the minors and or waiving and DFAing someone who's out of options. And that week ended up going about as well as we could have hoped. You see, we took the 4th game of the series to win the series against Atlanta, and then we went to Chicago and won 3 in a row. So we are 72-70 as the month of August comes to an end here. 13.5 out in the division, which we never really thought was a possibility. But we've moved up, and we're only half a game out in the wild card after winning 6 in a row. So we've certainly got control of our own destiny. You can see the Padres are 6.5 up on us, and Cardinals are now 4.5 behind us. So you could make an argument that it's a battle of Pennsylvania here between the Phillies and the Pirates for that final wild card spot in the National League. Obviously, a lot of time before that will be decided, but we've gotten ourselves into a decent position. Sean Street only did 27 pitches in that first outing, only an inning and 2/3. Only 1 hit allowed, did strike out 1. Think we will still bring him back, and we can go ahead and sim ahead with no game today. Go ahead and sim ahead to tomorrow to the roster expansion in the month of September. We'll bring Street up, even if maybe we only get 45, 50 pitches out of him in his next start, 3 or 4 innings. Hopefully, he'll be effective for us, right back on top of that Pirates rotation. And we've at least put ourselves in the position where we're going to be playing some important games here in the month of September. Linares, for a wrecked player, kind of the least surprising news that the injury there is lingering, and no certain date as to when he's going to be back. Nakahara looks like he's out for another week. As I talked about, we're going to put Street back on the Major League roster, give us a 14th pitcher, and then we're also going to bring Jerry Drake back, who we sent down when Alex Ruacho was eligible. So those are the changes to get us to a 28-man rotation. Just going to take a quick look at the schedule to see if maybe we're going to have a matchup with the Phillies. And it does not look like we'll be playing the Phillies here in the month of September. So we've got, not sure whether they played or not yesterday. We're probably either a half a game, a full game behind, or tied. Ooh, and we're tied now, so they lost a 3rd straight yesterday. So we are in a flat-footed tie for that last playoff spot in the National League as the month of September begins, up by 4.5 on St. Louis. So as I said, there's certainly an argument that it's a 2-team battle at this point, although there are 4 other teams within 7 games. But we are getting to the point, 142 games into the season, only 20 games left. Even a 4.5 game lead gets pretty hard to overcome at this point of the season. But got some games against St. Louis coming up, so this is our opportunity to, over these next two games, hopefully put if we take them both, probably take St. Louis out of the wild card race and puts us in a much better position. You can see we've got two more at St. Louis in a couple of weeks. Those could be pretty important games if they play really well and we play mediocre-ish over the first couple weeks of September. Taking a look at the team statistics, 18-11 for the month of August, so that was a big turnaround. Sadly, the 620 winning percentage, not quite what I think we need. But we're tied for the last wild card spot now. So although we didn't win as many games as I thought we might need to in August, right now it's a race between us and the Phillies. You can see we have improved to 12th in runs scored, still 8th in runs allowed. So the offense maybe reverting a little bit towards the mean at this point. Hopefully can continue to score more runs over these last 3+ weeks of the season. You can see our Pythagorean record with that horrible offense of 68 and 74 is 4 games worse than we've actually performed on the field. So that is not the most optimistic sign for the Pirates. But as I said, we're tied for the last wild card spot as September begins. We've got our ace pitcher back. It's all in front of us, despite the ups and downs of this 2048 season. And we ended up with our 667 winning percentage for the week. We did it the ugly and hard way. We lost the 2-game series against the team that's chasing us, the Cardinals. But then we won 4 in a row at home against the Reds. And those were pretty big games for us because we now are going on the road for the next 8 games over the next week and a half. Taking a look at the standings, we're up 2 on the Phillies for the wild card. Magic number for the wild card down to 13. 12.5 behind in the division, so we'll probably be officially eliminated, although we've known in our hearts that we've been eliminated for probably a month now. But we'll be officially eliminated from the Central over the next week. So this is a huge stretch for us at Arizona and at the Giants over the next week. Taking a look at the standings, Giants 93 wins, best team in baseball, already clinched a playoff spot, so that's a tough spot. The Diamondbacks, one of the worst teams in baseball, though, at 64 and 83. So tough matchup on the road, and then an easier matchup on the road over the next 6 games. Obviously want to keep winning series. You can see our fan interest has dipped down to a 79. Attendance this year has definitely been spotty with the higher ticket prices, but revenue per game still tracking slightly above where it was a year ago when we had more fans in the seats, but a lower ticket price. Quick look at the injury list. Linares still an unknown return. Nakahara theoretically going to be back from that strained MCL in 2 games. He is a player that, particularly against right-handed pitching, still looks, at least on paper, like a pretty good offensive player. Will be nice to get that bat back into the lineup against righties, hopefully at some point on the road trip. And unfortunately, we lost the first game on the road to the Diamondbacks, 5-4. We also had an off day yesterday, and we're only half a game ahead of Philly now because they've now won 2 in a row. So it's going to be quite a battle. The Braves and the Cardinals are lurking 4.5 and 5.5 back. Good news is that we do have Nakahara back, although he's been out over 5 weeks at this point, and he's wrecked physically at this point in the season. I think we just gotta put him back into the lineup. Hopefully catch a little bit of lightning in a bottle with the veteran, but we've got 28 players on the roster. Going to be pretty easy for us to send one of the outfielders down, or perhaps utility infielder Mario De Leon. Drake hasn't played very much. Godfrey played a little more when he was starting for that week and a half. I guess we will send Drake down to make room. And as I said, it may be aggressive after a 35-year-old wrecked player has missed 5 weeks with his third stint on the IL of the season, to not give him a few days down in AAA to shake the rust off. But at this point, we're running out of games. We're half a game up, like I said, for the wild card. And there are literally, today on September 9th, the season ends 2 weeks from today. So if Nakahara goes 0 for 12 with 9 strikeouts over his first 3 games, we'll know he's rusty and he should have been in AAA. If he suffers an injury, probably should have eased him back into the lineup a little more than we did. But at this point in the season, we've got to see if we can catch some lightning in a bottle with that bat of his. So we're going to put Nakahara right back into the lineup against righties. As we talked about earlier, .99 average on the season and 5 home runs and 151 at-bats with 3 trips to the IL. So if the batting average gets up over 200 over the next week, we'll know that he's been at least somewhat productive. If it continues to plunge, probably should have given him a few days down in AAA. And we got our 667 winning percentage again this past week. We did it the hard way, losing the first game against Arizona and then taking 2, and then losing the first game at San Francisco and then taking 2. So 4-2 record over the first 6 games of that 8-game road trip. Pretty solid. Taking a look at the standings, we're up 3 on the Phillies for that third wild card. We just won 2 in a row, as we talked about. They've lost 2 in a row. They're back at 500. So at 80 and 74, our magic number is down to 6. We've got a couple against the Cardinals team that's, I don't even know if I can say that they're chasing us anymore at 7.5 back. Actually, I don't think I can, because there's only 8 games left in the season, so they are pretty much done at this point. Another good little piece of news: Luis Linares ready to come back. So we are going to send Mario De Leon, utility player who has been up most of the year due to injuries. Has hit 286 for us. David Green would be the other guy to send down, or Jaden Godfrey, but I think we still have options with, or maybe we don't have options with De Leon, and that's why he ended up. No, we do have an option year left with him. He's been a productive player for us. I got to give this a little more thought than I expected as to who we're going to send down to make room for Linares in his glove. And I think we're actually going to keep De Leon up. Like his glove and like his production more than what we've gotten from David Green, the 27-year-old. Has been up the past few years, but still does have 3 option years left. Hitting just 204 after hitting 239 last year. He did lead the National League with 48 doubles 2 seasons ago and hit 300. But he's never consistently produced at the major league level since then, and he's been getting less playing time, obviously, at first base ever since we brought on Zelaya at the beginning of last season also. I don't know whether he'll refuse the assignment. He is a somewhat established major leaguer at this point. Nope, looks like we can get him down there. Bring Linares back up to give us a little more depth, and let's hope we can get this across the finish line. Nakahara checking in on him. Batting average is down to 182. So probably should have given him a few games to kind of get his timing back down in AAA. But we did win 4 of 6 last week, like I said, and I think that he is still a player who can potentially, hopefully, luck into a couple home runs for us down the stretch as we've got 8 games left. We can officially eliminate the Cardinals with a win, and then we're going to have a 6-game series against the Cubs, 3 at home and 3 on the road to finish up the season. All right, we split the 2 games at St. Louis and once again did it the hard way, losing the first game of the series and then winning the second game. So we've got 6 left against the Cubbies at this point. We are up 4 on the Phillies, who continue to lose. They've lost 4 in a row. Magic number is down to 3, and the Cubs at 71 and 85 are the worst team in the NL Central. So, despite all of the travails of this season, it's right ahead of us right now, and we could technically clinch at home this weekend if we win 3 in a row. And that would allow us to kind of start getting our rotation set for the playoffs potentially. So see what we can do in the next 3 against the Cubbies, and hopefully get the Pirates back into the playoffs. We're getting close. And we did sweep the series against the Cubs. So for the 9th time in the 11 years of this playthrough, the Pirates are in the playoffs. So feeling better about the fact that we didn't totally pack it in at the trade deadline. Brought Mr. Rab on board. Let's see what he's done with us. 5-3 with a 3.39 ERA. So as I mentioned, I don't hate our 4-man rotation of Street, Arroyo, Smith, and Rab for the playoffs. It's just a matter of hopefully over these last 3 games, now that we've clinched things, I think it's fine if Arroyo pitches today. Sean Street went 3 days ago, so the one thing we're going to want to do is make sure that we don't pitch him a last game of the season. So we are probably going to rest Sal Valadez for the next couple of days. And then we will have a rested Sal Valadez to put into the rotation and pitch and start the last game of the year, which will hopefully ensure that we can go with Street and Arroyo 1-2 in the play. And although if Arroyo pitches today, yeah, he should be on normal rest, because there should be at least 1 off day before the playoffs begin, maybe 2, and then Street would be going in game 1. So I think it's fine to pitch Arroyo today. Checking in on our friend Mr. Nakahara, batting average down to 172, and he still has not hit another home run. You can see he's hit close to 30 at-bats since he came back up. And we beat the Cubs in the first game on the road at Wrigley, lost the second, so now we are at game 162. So taking a look at the pitching, mentioned I had rested Valadez the last couple of days. We're going to force him into a starting role, and we are going to bench Street, so there's no risk of him getting any action today. That should allow us to have Street, Arroyo, Smith, and Rab. So although we are going to be, as our rotation, so although we are going to be up against it, looks like at this point it could be either the Mets or the Reds, a 96 and a 97 win team that will end up being on the road against in the first round of the playoffs. At least we're going to be going into that 3-game series on the road with the 3 pitchers that we'd want to have on the mound. Oof, and a very ugly finish to the season with a 15 to nothing loss. Ooh, gave up 10 runs in the fourth inning. So Valadez fell to 8 and 18. Wright, Arenales, and Bin Daoud on in relief. So don't love the fact that this team is now going into the playoffs with two straight losses. But the important thing is that we are in the playoffs. Ooh, you can see the Braves with 7 wins down the stretch to be the only National League team with a winning record that didn't make it into the playoffs. But we are in, and it looks like we're going to be facing a familiar foe. Cincinnati ended up with 97 wins, while the Mets had 98 and the Giants 100. Those three teams are the three best teams in baseball, as Boston had 96 to lead the American League this year as they prepare to try to defend their World Series championship. But we have got the Pirates back into the playoffs, and that really was all that we could ask for. Take a look at how we did down the stretch. The 85 wins was about where we think we needed to be. We probably thought we needed a win or two more than that, being conservative. Didn't quite have the 667 winning percentage, but we did go 31 and 18 down the stretch with this team, which, as we've talked about, has got us back into the playoffs. Still only tied for 13th in runs scored, only 7th in runs allowed, and our Pythagorean record was 78 and 84. So most of the metrics say we don't deserve to be in the playoffs, but the Pirates are a playoff team, and we're not going to apologize for that. So glad, as I said, to get this team back into the playoffs for the 9th time in 11 years as the GM of the Pirates. And you can see those 9 playoff appearances. Every time we've had a winning record, we've got the team into the playoffs. And you can see the .525 winning percentage this season is the worst that we've had in any of our playoff seasons. But we are in the tournament, and we will find out how we perform in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.